What's going on YouTube? Kronos here, and welcome to the very beginning of my revised guide series. So I figured we'd go ahead and go through just a bit of an intro and opening and kind of explain what I'm going to be working with, what we're going to be doing to not overfluff every single guide overall. Um, just to start things off, this idea or the way that I'm going to be doing these guides actually came from a lot of different locations as I have experimented with different types of guides, whether it be very basic or very complex, from something as simple as, the few videos I've done for the classes in NGS versus something as, extensive as my, what was it? My full connect guide video, or my why I say full connect is a trap video back in base PSO2, where we went into like exact frame calculations and things like that. I figured getting somewhere around a medium would be best overall, and I got a really good idea from a good friend of mine, another content creator over in a different game by the name of Zeno. So I'm gonna leave a link in the video description to his channel. He does some really good guide videos for some of the classes, some of the recent stuff, and it's put in a format that makes a lot of sense. And he made a point that realistically can apply to just about any game. The focus of our guide video is going to be how to not be bad. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that's pretty obvious. How to not be bad isn't too difficult to figure out. Well, realistically, you'd be surprised how often people try to be extremely good or just very basic. The first step in playing anything realistically should be trying to not be bad. And that's going to be our overall goal with any of our guide videos. I'm going to go through things like all of the PAs and situations you should be using them in, gather if they have a situation, the basic overall deal of the class itself, a quick look at the skill trees. Of course, we'll leave those in the video description as always, and then of course my subclass recommendations and weapon and gear recommendations. Now, hopefully these guide videos won't be insanely long. They're going to vary depending upon the class, but I did want to give you guys at least a little bit of an idea of where I'll be gathering a lot of this information ahead of time. That way you have something to look back, something to look for on your own, and something to look at while you're going through these guides. Now, like I said beforehand, we're going to go through skill trees and things like that. It's not hard to figure that sort of stuff out. We'll talk about recommended classes to have as a subclass, along with the main class, and my reason behind those sorts of things. But what I wanted to show you guys actually was some frame data. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this frame data was you guys can get an idea of why I choose to use certain abilities, where I choose to use them, and how I came up with the calculations that I have in my mind, and why I believe certain things as they are. So we're going to pop over to this frame data sheet really quick here. Now, I'm going to leave a link in the video description to my old video that I did on base PSO2 about why I said full connect was a trap overall, because it explains how frame data works, how it's calculated. But if I want to give you a quick crash course in this, essentially what it works out to be is frames are the number of frames it takes from an ability to start all the way to its end. Now, there's 60 frames per second. So of course, frames are calculated, the way they're calculated is by just recording them at a 60 FPS game lock, and then taking that data and counting the number of frames it takes from start to finish of that actual ability itself. Then taking, as far as DPS goes, taking the damage notation of the number of frames it takes and gathering exactly 60 frames of that damage notation. I guess I'll give you a quick example. Let's see, what's a good weapon or a good attack to use? Something that's just like a one hit. Let's look at first point. Yeah, first half of Julian is 45 frames. You can see that its damage is 203 and its DPS comes out to be 270. Well, why is that? Well, we want damage DPS, or damage per second, and we know that our game is going to be set to 60 frames a second. So we want the damage of what happens in 60 frames. Now, this is all in a vacuum situation, of course. There are always going to be variables and things of that sort, but in this case, we know that 203 damage is done over 45 frames. We want 60 frames of that, so we need an extra 15 frames of that damage notation. So we take an extra 15 frames worth of this damage notation itself, and we add it to the overall DPS. Pretty simple. Usually something a little bit bigger is going to be easier to calculate. So let's say second half of it is 124 frames. What we would do is take 60 frames of the overall damage that's dealt. So at 569, we only want 60 frames of this damage, so we would divide by the number of frames that we have available and then multiply by the actual amount of damage. So we divide by the 60, or we'd take the 60 divided by, I think, the 124. Does that work out to be right? I think so. Or is it? No, you take the 124, you divide it into the 60, you get the amount of actual, the percentage of what you're going to be getting of the frame data, and then you multiply that by actual damage, which will give you the 276. Again, I explained this much better in the other video itself. We can go into more detail there, but that's the reason we're looking at this here. Now, times may change, and I'm going to go back through this later, but normally I would look at the Swiki first. Unfortunately, Swiki doesn't have all the relevant frame data like they used to in the past. I'm going to have to wait until they update some of this information, but I've gone through and calculated frame data myself on some of these abilities, so I feel pretty confident in using this data that we're looking at here. So in case you're someone who wants to find out, you look at something and say, hey, look, I use this in this situation. Your first question is why, what makes this that better choice, so on and so forth. I'm gonna leave these linked in every single guide video. You guys can take a look at them yourselves, see exactly what we're working with, see why, people saying things like, jet boots should get nerfed or buffed in certain aspects. I think they're insane. But again, we'll leave that as a talk for those videos. But that's really about it. If you guys are even watching this video, you probably are one of one of the realest fans that I have itself. I'm still not sure if I'm going to release this video at the same time as when I released the very first guide video, which of course is going to be Bouncer, or if I'm going to release them separately. As far as the guide videos go, I'm going to release the entire class together, so it's going to be both weapons or all the weapons for that class itself. It might make the videos too long, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to have to play around with that and see how I feel about it moving forward. Anyway, let's not make this too long, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to toss them into the comments below, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Take care. Peace out.